In 336 BC, an event happened that would change the world as we know it. Alexander of Macedon ascended the throne as king over his Greek clan, and over the next 10 years would go on to conquer more land than anyone had in the entirety of the world. And so by the age of 30, Alexander the Great was a king above kings. He was the biggest landholder the world had ever seen. And with that land owning came Hellenism, which is the making of all things Greek. And so Greek religion, Greek culture, and Greek language gets infused into almost everything around, which includes the Jewish nation. And so people no longer just speak Hebrew or Aramaic, they now speak Greek as a common trade language. And so Greek becomes of utmost importance to the Bible, and therefore the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, becomes the Bible that everyone uses. So we can't talk about the Hebrew Bible and how it comes to us and its transmission without talking the Septuagint. So today, Septuagint it is. Sometime in the mid-200s BC, Aristeas writes a letter explaining that the librarian of Alexandria requested that some men are sent from Israel to translate the Hebrew scriptures into Greek so that it can be at this library where all these other incredible books are. And so Israel sends out 6 people from each tribe. So there's 72 men that go and they translate the Old Testament, and legend has it that in 72 days, they translate all of the Torah into Greek. That story later gets embellished over and over again. Philo, who was a historian around the 1st century AD, changes the number to 70. Which probably aligns with the 70 elders that went up with Moses onto Mount Sinai. And the legend even grows from there, saying that those 70 men each went to their own space, translated the entirety of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, and all came back together after 70 days and had the exact same translation, therefore giving the Septuagint's credence as this sort of God-inspired word. And that just shows you how important the Septuagint is for the people. The Septuagint gains this level of being the God-inspired translation. So when we look into the New Testament and the Greek that's written there, most often that Greek uses the Septuagint when it's making quotations. And so the Bible that the early Christians used was the Septuagint. And so we have to understand and study the Septuagint in order to understand the world in which the writers of the New Testament lived. So often you'll see the Septuagint translated or abbreviated as LXX, which stands for 70, which looks back to that all-important task of the 70 translators translating the Bible perfectly. So if you see LXX, that's what it's referring to is the Septuagint. You even see that 70 in the name Septuagint with sept and all that stuff. So you can see how the lore, the folklore of the Septuagint being translated even comes to us today and how we use the Septuagint. So why is the Septuagint important? Well, besides, being the Bible that early Christians translated out of, we have complete Septuagint that goes back so much further than we have a complete Hebrew. Centuries before Christ, we have the Septuagint in pieces, and then we have the Septuagint in its final form from pretty early on in the scheme of time. And so to study the Septuagint helps us a lot with understanding what the Hebrew originally was. It helps us understand how the form of the text got to where it is, how these people are translating it, how they went about, sort of what the original text probably was. It also helps us in being the first commentary on the Old Testament. And I know that may sound weird. You're like, there's no commentary in the Septuagint. It's a translation. But all translations are a commentary in that the translator has to take the concepts and ideas in the text they're translating, in this case, the Hebrew, and they have to bring it over into a more common language, their language, whatever they're writing in. And so the way in which those words are translated, how they're used, the way in which the authors use idioms, right? Like metaphors, how they translate that tells us a lot about the original text and the original form of that text. And so there's a lot of information to be gleaned off of that. Let's go back to the New Testament as well. There is a method of Bible study, or there is a task in Bible study that you should always do. This is like my number one rule when studying the New Testament and even the Old Testament in some instances. But if you ever run across a quotation of another book in your study of the New Testament, you must go back and read that quotation in its original context. That is going to tell you so much about why the author chose that. It brings in that context sometimes. Sometimes you have to decide if the context is important or not, but you have to go read it in its original context. And sometimes when you're reading those quotations in the Old Testament, they sound a lot different and they don't really, like, how did the word order change so much? Or what is going on with this that, there's some differences between what I have in my Old Testament. And so you have to realize that your Old Testament in the Bible that you use is translated from the Hebrew, like we talked about in the last episode, from the Masoretic text. But most of these authors are using the Septuagint as the basis of their translation. And so there can be some variances in how that is brought into Greek, the word order. And so I think it helps quell a lot of issues that come up when doing Bible study to understand the basis of the text. And so the Septuagint's hugely important for us still even today. So I know it seems weird, right? Why do I care about the Septuagint? Why is it important? Well, there's a lot of reasons I think it can be important. It's a lot of fun to study, actually, honestly. If you wanted a really easy resource to start studying the Septuagint, this one by Karen Jobes. I actually took a Septuagint class from her in grad school, and this book is incredible. It's pretty accessible, I would even say, for most people. So Invitation to the Septuagint, that's an awesome resource. I have my Greek Septuagint here just to show you what it looks like. This is in the original Greek. It's it tells you all the different backgrounds and all of that stuff. But there are books like this one from Brenton that is the original Greek, but in parallel is a translation in English. And this can actually be really helpful for Bible study, seeing what the Septuagint says and what the original authors of the New Testament were probably reading and trying to understand the basis of their text. It can be hugely important for understanding that. So I'll put those all below in the show notes so you can see those and hopefully get into a little more of the Septuagint. I feel like a lot of times it can feel really I don't know, you don't know what it's talking about or what these things are when you're doing Bible study and sort of digging into it. And these things help you understand what you're getting yourself into. And when you're getting into some real in-depth Bible study, it can help you see the text for what it is and maybe push you along further. So in next week's episode, I'm going to try to bring all of this together a little bit. I have a really practical example from the Old Testament about how understanding the Hebrew and the Greek comes into play all together. And we're going to walk through a pretty amazing example of that next week on the episode. So we're getting really practical, keeping this thing super, super easy to understand, but also super usable for your everyday life. So be sure you hit that like and subscribe button at the bottom just so you know when the episode's coming out. And we'll see you next week at Bootleg Bible College.